Hey everybody, welcome to Something to Bark About, the podcast where we're going to talk about dogs, dog training, and whatever else strikes my fancy. My name is Chad Mackin, and I will be your host and your guide on this journey into the world of dogs. Hey everybody, this is going to be a great episode, I think. I got Jay Jack to sit down with me and talk about his reintegration protocol, and it's a really good program, and it's one of the most common questions I get. People send me Facebook messages all the time. Hey, I have two dogs in the same household. They fight. What can I do about that? And I think Jay has the best systematic answers that I've seen to date, so we're going to let him talk about that. And I hope this is one of these things. I've been getting contacted by people who have listened to the separation anxiety episodes, trainers who are telling me, you know what, I'm having my clients listen to these, or I'm linking them on my webpage because I think it's valuable information. I hope this one is going to be similar to that. I hope the trainers who are listening to this are going to say, this is really good information. I want my clients to have it and make it available. But here's the deal. To do that, I had to cut out a lot of stuff at the beginning because when Jay and I get together, we just started talking about life since dog training conversations ended and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to do this episode, which is going to be for the general public and anybody who wants it. And if you're a dog trainer and you want to share it, this is the episode you want to share. But I'm also going to do the bonus episode, which is going to include all of the other stuff. So for people who miss dog training conversations, that's going to be kind of what we're going to do for you guys. So that'll be the bonus episode. All right. So 2 episodes, a lot of the same content, but we're going to add some other stuff to the second episode for those of you who miss Jay and the old podcast. All right. So with no further ado, let's get right to it. Yes. So the reason why I wanted you to come, I've been trying to get you back. I shouldn't say trying. I've been thinking about getting you back on ever since we had you on the last time. Okay. And there's a subject that I get contacted with quite a bit, and it's one of the most common questions I get from people on Facebook who go, what would you do with this? What would you do with that? And it's an area where I defer to your expertise almost entirely. You have a system put out for it, but I want to talk about your reintegration protocol when you have 2 dogs in the same house who are fighting, and how do you get them back in? You present on this subject. I watched you present on it like 3 times in Australia. I've watched you present on it here, and also I saw part of your presentation that you did up in Washington when we did that little thing together there. So I've seen it plenty of times, and every time I hear it, every time I see it, every time I hear you talk about it, I pick up something new. So I kind of want to let this be your show today and let you help my listeners know how you do this stuff. It'll be nice to have. One of the things that's been interesting about this podcast, by the way, is I'm getting contacted by a lot of trainers who are telling me they're having their clients listen to specific episodes, like the separation anxiety episode. And I had another person tell me that they were making all of their employees listen to the client compliance episodes. Oh, wow. So this podcast is a little different because it's more directly related to subjects than the other one. Yeah. People can actually go, oh, I want to listen to this podcast on this subject. So this is going to be in my library of things to send to my clients if they have dogs who are fighting. I'm going to keep this link handy, print it out, QR code, whatever, so that when my clients come for that meet and greet, I go, before we start working, listen to this. One of the things, but I think this is it's a really valuable thing, and I want to give it to people to listen to. And one of the things that I tell people whenever they ask me about this, they bring in 2 dogs that are fighting. I tell them, I say, listen, this is a process. It's a long process. We don't do this overnight. And I also say most people who start it don't finish. It takes too long, and what happens is they get greedy. They feel like they have a certain degree of success, and they push their luck. And every time you push your luck, you have a failure. That puts you almost back at the beginning. So you have to be in it for the long haul, the long, boring haul. And so
the other thing that happens to people is they don't. Sometimes when I think of the people that don't finish, I think of the people that get to good enough.
Yeah.
Like there's a period where the dog on the program, there's a period of time where the dog is being managed and life is out of the stress. You know what I mean? Like both dogs are on place, but you have the peace of mind to be able to watch a movie. Like right. You can sit there and watch a movie and there's no fight, but they're both under orders. You know what I mean? And then that is not the end of the protocol for me. Like I got that from you. Like dogs, You're not done until you can trust your dogs at liberty. And maybe you never can get there, but it's like shoot for the stars and end up with the moon. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like your goal is to get them as close to peaceable liberty as you possibly can safely. But most people get to managed lack of stress and then go, yeah, that's good enough.
Right.
They just stop. And you're like, I mean, I get it, because if you've been living in the stress of like waiting for a fight to pop off and you're just stressed, it's like living on a prison yard. You're just waiting for something to jump off. It's like, I get it. Once you get to the point where everything is managed and you can go, you have to be dedicated then to the well-being of your dog, because you've already it's like you've done the negative reinforcement thing. You've taken the pressure off yourself, but now it's like, that's cool. The pressure's off, but how much do you want to accomplish? Because you can get a lot more,
right?
Most of the time, you know what I mean?
So that's the first thing I think that everyone needs to know. This is a process, and it does take time because we want to do it safely, and mistakes are costly, especially when you have serious dogs. Like you got a couple, dogs who aren't real intent and they're just, talking smack. That's one thing. But when you got dogs who are serious, mistakes are costly and potentially fatal. And so you got to take your time. This is not something that you want to put a timeline on and say, I'm going to accomplish this in 6 weeks or 6 months or even a year. You go as I can't remember who it is. I said it in the last podcast I did. I think Robin McFarland and Tyler Muto have a very similar saying. I don't remember which one is whose, but it's as fast as you can, as slow as you have to.
Yeah.
And that's never more true than with this subject, because it is one of the toughest things that trainers ever asked to solve.
Yeah.
Right. So let's start and tell me a little. For people who don't know you or know your background, talk a little bit about the situation that you lived in that required you to come up with this.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in and around game bred dogs. Like I grew up in Louisiana, and my background is in pit bulls, specifically like the game bred pit bulls. And so because of that, I was also kind of engrossed in that culture of one dog. Like I did not socialize dogs. I did not let a dog run loose. Like I was in that mindset of like, these dogs are not going to be, you know what I mean? Like it's not going to be like, hey, Fluffy needs a friend. I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? I grew up with murder dogs. That was my gig. And so I met my wife, and she had non-pit bulls. And I was like, I was faced with the dilemma of find another soulmate or figure out how to have these dogs live together. And soulmates are fairly rare. So I was like, well, it looks like I'm going to have to figure this out. And I tried a number of different approaches, a number of different advice from professional trainers. I was not a trainer at the time. I was a dog person, in air quotes, and I was a very good dog handler, and I could live with dogs well, but I did not understand training. I didn't know anything about the concepts of training. I didn't know I didn't understand. I could live intuitively well, but I didn't know how to do behavior modification. And so I was getting advice from trainers and stuff, and it just was not working. It was like, it just didn't work. The advice that works on the stereotypical dogs just did not work for me. And as my wife and I were together longer, that pack of dogs grew old and eventually passed away and were replaced with other dogs. And of course, once she met my dog, she was then firmly in love with the pit bull world as well. So now the next batch of dogs was all pits. So now I was in the situation of not just managing one gamey dog in a house of normal dogs, but managing many gamey dogs, which is another layer of complexity. Because if only one dude on the yard is a jerk and nobody else wants to fight, it's pretty peaceable. It's annoying, but it's pretty peaceable. If everybody on the yard is like, say that again, then it's like we have a much more tense yard, So, so I had to kind of learn through that process myself. And through things I learned and just making modifications to the process in my own mind and my own understanding of it, I kind of came up with a thing that worked very well for us, and then wound up giving that advice to a bunch of other people. And it turns out that it works really well for most of the people that I give that advice to. You know, I have yet to have people have horrible results with it. You know,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where it came from.
All right. And so at one time you had 4 game bred pit bulls in your house living together.
One was from a good litter, but was soft personally.
Okay.
We love her anyway. I'm not ashamed of her.
Okay.
But one could be, yeah. Two were legitimately bad. Not bad. Like I love the dog, but like Mabel and Jax both were like serious cases. Milo was a super, super mellow, personable dog and was actually dog social. But if challenged, would absolutely fight to the death, right? So as long as everybody got along, he was cool. And Mabel is very dog dominant, but doesn't look to fight. She looks to settle scores. She will fight. When the fight jumps off, she gets in, and she's in 100%. Bella avoids everything. She's a little soft. And Jax was the powder keg that we put in. We were managing everything really, really well until Jax. Jax, he unfortunately knows nothing about communication, or didn't, at the time. And so it was like having a kid with, like, if I speak about this incorrectly, forgive me, but like Asperger's or autism or something, like I don't know if that's the right one, but like the kids that don't recognize
social cues
and facial expressions and stuff. Like you can teach them, hey, you can take a Polaroid and put it on the wall. This is uncomfortable. This is angry. This is funny. And then they can like learn, oh, you're making the funny face, you're having fun. Or, oh, you're making the uncomfortable face, you're uncomfortable. Living with Jax was like that. Like he didn't understand canine communication at all. And he is extremely dog social, but he didn't know how to communicate. And so he started a lot of fights. Like he's like somebody that close talks way too intensely and doesn't understand why people are shoving him back. And then when he gets shoved, he thinks he's being attacked and he defends himself. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like if you polygraphed both participants in the fight, they would both pass a polygraph saying the other one started.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're both 100% correct. Jax is like, what the hell's going on? I'm just defending myself. And I was like, me too. So it's like, yeah, it was a real difficult scene because of the level of communication that was needed and not attained. Like they just did not know how to communicate. And that was a real tough one. That took me about 8 months to get those dogs from where they would put each other in the hospital easily to being able to cohabitate, not in kennels, not in a crate and rotate. Like, you know what I mean? Like we slept with nobody in kennels. They could ride in the car, nobody in kennels. I could leave them unattended together in the car while I go to the grocery store. Like their life was one of liberty, but it took me like 8 months, And that was a real trick. I learned a lot about training through that process, I think,
All right. So there's your background, and these dogs had hospitalized each other on a few occasions. And
yeah.
And
they were not jokes of dogs. Yeah. They were legit dogs.
Yeah. So, and I want to set that up because I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people when they hear about reintegration protocols, their thinking is that this isn't going to work for real serious dogs. This is only going to work for dogs who are mostly serious or kind of a little weak, but you're talking with some of the worst case scenarios you could have.
Yeah, no, this is like I've been able to reintegrate very, 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 very dangerous dogs. Like, because the truth is, like that axiom is true. Like most dogs fight because they think they have to. They don't fight because they want to. And I know that there are dogs that enjoy a good scrap. But there's three kinds of dogs that'll fight, right? There's dogs that enjoy a good scrap, and that's easy. You just teach them not to. Like, I know that sounds stupid, but as easy it is to teach a dog, like people will throw the ball and the dog runs for the ball. It's not that hard to teach the dog. You wait till I release you after I throw it. Like almost anybody can figure that out. So dogs that fight because they like a good scrap, it's just like teaching them to leave a tennis ball alone. You know what I mean? Like, hey, that thing that you like to do, you just can't do. We can do this other stuff, but you can't do that. You know what I mean? So it's like dogs that like a good scrap are pretty easy to square away. Dogs that fight because they think they have to are pretty easy to square away. You just have to show them that they don't have to. Now, and then that becomes a process and a trick. And that's what most of this protocol that we're going to talk about is. And then there's that really true 1% dog, the Jeffrey Dahmer of dogs. So they're just sociopathic. You know what I mean? And you can, I mean, why you would want to, I don't know, but you could teach them how to have managed safety in your life, but it is almost never going to be, because they're not doing it because they need to try to find a way to get safe, or they're trying to manage resources or self-soothe, and they're not doing it like an impulse control, like, hey, I want to scrap around a little bit right now, let's get a little bloody. Like, they're not like that. They're like, you shouldn't be breathing and I'm going to make you stop.
Right.
And not because you did something, not because you looked at me or you didn't negotiate properly, but just because I want to murder all of my own kind. Like, that's exceptionally rare, I think. You know?
Yeah, I agree. That's
And those are the dogs that, you know what I mean? You got to decide, why are you keeping that? Why are you keeping a dog like that with multiple dogs? Like,
right.
What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure I can get to a point where that dog can live a managed life safely, because that I know I can accomplish. But then what degree of management is going to make it where it's not fair to the, like, you know what I mean? Like, if he's on place or crated all the time, what kind of life is that? And why are you insisting that he live it? You know what I mean?
And not only that, the other dogs in the house living with that sociopath, knowing that he's waiting for his chance to kill them. Like, every dog should be able to feel safe in their home.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that fortunately, that is like super, super, super crazy rare.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's super rare.
Yeah, I always tell people I've been doing socialization with antisocial dogs for, over a decade now, literally all over the world to do this stuff.
Yep.
And I've seen that real Jeffrey Dahmer dog like twice.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, if you think you might have seen it, you haven't.
Yeah.
Because when you see it, you will never mistake something else for it again. There's no question. Like,
No.
the only word that comes to my mind is evil when I see it. Like like whenever I think back on those two dogs, like I get cold shooting pains in my belly, like in my guts. I go, that's wrong. Like that is something.
You shouldn't do that. That's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's do this. Let's, I'm going to, how do I want to present this? I'm going to start with a little bit of theory about it before we start into the nuts and bolts. But it goes like this. Most people, like, obviously, if you have dogs that are fighting, crackhead can't get off crack if they have access to a crack pipe, right? So, like, you're not going to break the habit if they're continually fighting. So you must separate the dogs mechanically so they cannot fight. Like, they can't get into a fight. You know what I mean? You can't stop eating Twinkies while you're eating Twinkies. You know what I mean? Like, you got to stop them from fighting. The problem is, most people, when they separate dogs, they separate them socially, not mechanically, right? So, like,
big distinction.
They put one in the basement and one upstairs, or they put one gets the yard and the other gets the house, and then they rotate. So when people say crate and rotate, they're not talking about a crate in the living room and the dog that is rotated out loose is also in the living room. They're talking about literally all the way separated. Like, both dogs believe they are an only dog. Like, when my wife was a kid, her parents used to tell her that she had a sister that lived in the attic and she never saw it. And we wonder why she turned out to be insane. But, you know what I mean? Like, that was like a little joke they played. But that's what most dogs that are separated live like. They believe that they live in a house, then they are the only dog, but there's this smell, this sound, and they know there's one in there somewhere, but they never see him and they never deal with it. And the problem is, teaching dogs to live together is teaching them about social skills. And if they never see another dog, you can't develop skill around or regarding the other dog, you know? And the other thing is, I got to separate them mechanically, but I don't want to separate them socially because I want them to see the flow of the house from inside their crate. So if I put the dog in the bedroom and shut the door and I let the other dog out, and the other dog is running around the house, and I'm starting to do the rules, boundaries, and limitations bit, and I'm training the dog, and the dog is learning to defer to me, that's really cool. But the dog in the bedroom does not get to see that, does not get to know that. You know what I mean? All they know is what they saw before, and what they saw before was a dog that had no control, and they had to fight to defend themselves. And they have no other experience than that. And then you spend 3 months training your dog. You know, you can teach them how to sit down and come back and place and all this kind of stuff. And the other dog gets the same treatment. But neither dog has seen the other dog train. So all they know about that dog is what they used to know.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then one day after a couple months, you bring them back out, you put them back together, and you're hoping all the training holds up and they fight again. And everybody's like, dude, I've been doing obedience. We've kept them separated, and we've been doing obedience for like the last 6 months, and it just didn't do anything. And it's not the obedience that didn't work. It's the fact that there's a social contract that everybody has to know about, right? So like social beings have to know that the other beings are on board with the social contract, or else they don't feel safe or secure or content with their life. You know what I mean? The example I always give people is I've got to know that there's a line of social responsibility from this being to the greater good or to me or to something. If a guy walks in the door right now and starts acting really squirrely, I'm going to feel like I don't know what's going on. Like if he's talking to himself and just totally out of character, I'm going to be like, uh-oh, something's wrong. And I'm going to feel the need to go, hey, can I help you? Like, are you all right? Do you need something? If that guy immediately switches from talking to himself and it turns out he's got an earphone in, you know what I mean? And he's like, oh, hey, hang on just a second, I'm on the phone. And he starts behaving in a socially acceptable manner. I will then feel better because he's giving me signals that, hey, I'm playing by the rules. It just looked weird. You didn't know I had a headphone in. It just looked weird, but I play by the rules. I will feel better because he's shown me signs that he knows what the game is and he's playing the game too. If you go, oh, that's my cousin, he's a little off, but he's harmless, I'll take care of it, I then also stop caring because I assume you're going to take care of it, you're all set. Like I assume there is a line of social responsibility. People that are too scared to do it themselves will call the police, and the police will come establish a line of social responsibility. But there must be a line of social responsibility established, or else you have this knot in your stomach as a social being that dude's not playing by the game, and it'll freak you out, right? The problem is, you know, that dominance nonsense, like people are like, you got to be the pack leader because dogs are just little pirates or whatever, and if you're not the pack leader, one of them is going to step up and be the pack leader. Like if you're not the alpha, somebody else is going to be the alpha.
Right.
It's like every bit of crap starts with a little kernel of truth. You know, every shit tree starts with a little seed of truth. You know what I mean? So it's like you can use that one. You can have that one, right? So, but that's the thing is like, they're not wrong in the sense that when they come on the scene and they start hammering every dog on the property, it does tend to stop a lot of fights. But it's not because the alpha nonsense. It's because what they've done is they've shown every dog that there is a line of responsibility to a being. And then they stop trying to establish one of their own. I usually draw like a little triangle on a whiteboard. I put you, and then in the two bottom corners, it's the dog and the dog. And I go, you can train with this dog number one and develop this line that dog believes exists between you and them. They believe they need to down. They believe they need to sit. They believe they need to come when called. They believe they need to leave it or whatever, right? And you can develop it with the other dog as well. But if dog one can't see dog two's line of responsibility, if they don't get some kind of signal that the dog is responsible in some way, they will then try to establish a line of responsibility between themselves. It's not about being alpha, it's about being safe.
Yeah.
Dominance is just a way to become safe. The reason bullies act like they act is because it's easier to be a bully than get bullied. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Dominance is a tool that you can use to ensure your safety. And so they're correct in the sense that if it's not that if you don't dominate, they will dominate. It's that if you don't make them feel safe, they will find a way to make them feel safe. And their most natural genetic tool for that is dominance.
Right.
You know? And so like, I want to avoid that. So what I want to do is I want to separate the dogs mechanically. I will put them both in crates. So the first phase of this is the dog is in a crate or on a tether. And the reason that they're on a tether is because if the dog in the crate is learning about the flow of a house, right? They're learning. So if the dog in the crate is sitting there minding his business and the dog on the bed, the dog on the couch watching a movie with me decides they're going to start hard staring him and they leap off the couch and nail the front of the kennel and they start fence fighting at the door of the kennel, I have proven to the dog in the kennel I have no control. That dog is not socially responsible to me in any way, shape, or form. I've proven to them, if you ever get out of that kennel, you better watch your back because this dog's coming hot. You know? Right. If I have the dog on a tether, I can be watching the movie. And that's weird because people are like, if the dog's in a kennel, why does the other dog need to be on a tether? There's nothing can happen. And I'm like, it's not that they can't make contact. It's that I need to show the dog the line of responsibility. If I'm watching a movie and the dog launches off the couch, hits the end of his line, does a backflip, and I go, no, and then bring him back and put him in a down. What is wrong with you? Don't do that. You do not attack your brother. Okay, the dog in the kennel. I'm not thinking about the value of the correction of the dog hitting the end of his line and being blocked from fence fighting. I'm thinking more about the dog in the crate, seeing that I am on top of it. That's the important lesson. The dog in the crate goes, oh, wow. All right. And instead of posturing to take care of himself, goes, yeah, starts to eventually assume dad's on top of it. I'm not worried about you jumping up and running over here because it's not going to work because dad's caught you every time you've ever tried.
Right.
So the dog in the crate is watching the flow of the house. And that's where you start to demonstrate a line of social responsibility to the dog in the crate. So there's 2 crates in the living room. If I can have them side by side, that's beautiful. If I can't because they'll fence fight, then I separate them by a few feet. If I need to make a visual barrier, that's fine. If they need to be on opposite sides of the living room, that's fine. As long as every day, every time I see they've plateaued, they've tolerated one another at this distance, they get closer. Not so close that it's like the name game thing. Not so close that they can't break their own orientation. Right? I'm going to use a mechanism, right? Not so close that they can't break their orientation, but close enough that they notice.
Right.
And then once they stop caring, a little closer and a little closer until eventually their kennels are side by side and the existence of that other dog becomes just monotone. The existence of the other dog is not a trigger. Hearing them eat is not a trigger. Hearing them get up and turn 3 circles is not a trigger. Hearing the dog scratch its collar is not a trigger. Like the existence of the other dog ceases to be a trigger. We have used desensitization to make the other dog's presence not a trigger. We still need to work on the other dog's behavior not being a trigger, but their existence is no longer a trigger.
Right.
So the dog in the kennel is in the kennel. The dog out of the kennel is on a tether. And people go, well, how do I know when I can stop using the tether? And I'm like, look, if you have a line of responsibility, you do not need a line of cotton. But if you do not have a line of responsibility, you better have one made out of material. Because if the dog starts to jump off the couch and you can go, and the dog goes, sorry, and sits back down, you've successfully demonstrated that line of responsibility to the dog in the crate. If you go, and the dog goes, screw you, and jumps off and starts fence fighting, you've set yourself back because you've proven to the dog in the crate you have no responsibility. And that's no good, right? So you keep the dog on a tether until you can manage the dog in the house without a tether. Right. And then you're good. So that's one. The next thing I do is all the training occurs in front of the other dog's kennel. So don't take your dog out back into obedience where the dog in the kennel doesn't see it. Because at the first part, just the dog's presence is going to be tricky. The dog in the kennel is going to be like looking like an alligator. It's going to be like stalking at the front thing, watching that other dog walk around. And as long as you block the interaction, they're okay. Eventually, they'll start to get bored with the dog's presence. But then when you get up and you get food out and you start training in front of the dog's crate, the dog in the crate is definitely going to be like, what's going on? Right. And again, you got to play the distance game. If you can train 2 foot in front of their crate, awesome. If you need to train 50 yards from the crate, great. But you're not done with that level until you can train your dog in front of the other dog's crate, and the dog in the crate is absolutely bored.
Just to be clear here, when you're talking training, you're in your world, that means you're probably doing drivey work with tug or something like that.
Yeah, I will try to keep. So I generally will start with lower level stuff. Like I'll use food, but I won't go into super drive type of play, only because it will be difficult for the dog in the crate. You know what I mean? Or I can do personal play and a bunch of condition relaxation, place work. You know what I mean? Stuff that's like lower arousal level things. Because again, you want to set the dog up for success. And that training session, while it is good reps for the dog that is being trained, the major point of that training session is not the dog being trained. The major point of that training session is the dog in the crate, watching me go, back on your place board, and the dog going, yes, sir, and getting back on the place board. I'm demonstrating social control to the dog in the crate through that training session.
Right.
The dog in the crate is the dog that is doing the learning, not the dog that's out. I'm using the dog that's out to teach the dog in the crate the lessons.
Sure.
But the lessons are the demonstration of social responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, all right, cool. Once they're abjectly bored with watching the other dog in front of the crate, like if I train this dog for 15 minutes and then put him up, take the other dog out, train him for 15 minutes, and both dogs are just like, I'm bored with this. This does not matter at all. I barely look up from my sleeping position to watch you do this nonsense. Then I'm going to go, okay, cool. Now we're going to train in drive and start to be more exciting. Now you might have to back up 10, 20 feet or whatever. You have to play that orientation game a little bit, but I'm going to train in drive. Once I can train in drive and the dog in the crate is bored, I've taught this dog not to be aroused by the dog's presence, not to be aroused by the dog's movement, that I can control the dog both at moments of liberty, in training scenarios, and even in drive. Even when the dog's going on a tug toy, I can go out easy, and the dog listens to me. That is building a tremendous amount of confidence in the dog in the crate, watching you train the dog out.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the missing piece that literally nobody ever thinks about, is the dog watching from the crate is the target lesson. The dog out being worked is just the lesson the dog in the crate is watching, if that makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense.
So we do that. Once the dog has a pretty good solid place command and is also like not that impressed with the other dog doing training, now instead of doing it in a crate, I'm going to do it on place. So dog one, instead of being in the crate watching me train, is now on place watching me train. And this just got difficult. And obviously, dude, use back ties, like people doing this. Don't be a hero. If you don't have a helper, use a back tie. You know what I mean? And check your gear. Don't use chintzy stuff if you're talking about murder dogs. Like, use real gear. So I'll back tie the dog on place. The dog is on place. If he jumps off, he's going to get caught by the back tie. Not restrained on place with a back tie, but will be stopped before he gets to me by the back tie and gives me a chance to go put him back on place.
So like they can get 2 feet off the...
Yeah, they can get off the place board, but they can't go anywhere. I don't want the line making them be on the place board. I want their social responsibility making them be on the place board. I want the line keeping them from getting to me if they choose to break.
Got it.
So I put one dog on place and I train the other dog. This is more difficult for 2 reasons. One, instead of being in your crate and just sitting there, you are now doing training by being on your place board. Because even though you have a lot of options on your place board, there are still some decisions you can't make. So they're having a bit of impulse control instead of just being accepting the fact that they're shut in a crate. They're having to cooperate with being on a place board. And that's training, right? So one, instead of training for 15 minutes, watching inside the crate and then doing 15 minutes of work, you're now doing 30 minutes of work because it's a 15-minute place and then 15 minutes of work. So the dog is getting more work, more responsibility, but then also the dog believes that you're keeping them safe because the crate also keeps them safe. You know what I mean? Like they know the dog can't get to them. They know that even if you're an idiot and you go and drop the leash, the crate's going to save them. But when they're on place, they have to have a certain amount of, okay, I trust you to not let that dog come over here. And that's the training. The training is, again, not the dog doing the obedience. The training is the dog on place trusting you to handle the dog doing the obedience. And in a crate, they don't have to trust you, but when they're on place, they must trust you. Because if they don't believe that that line of social responsibility exists, they're going to put up themselves to protect themselves. They're going to establish a line of responsibility on their own. And so that's the next step. So when the dog is bored with watching the flow of the house, you start training in front of the crate. When they're bored with training in front of the crate, you start training in front of place. Once they're bored with that and you can play a raucous game of tug and the dog's just like on the place board, like, I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. Then we're going to go into liberty while one dog is on place. And again, if you need a helper, use a helper. If you don't have a helper, you're going to have to be creative with your use of back ties because you must have a back tie on the dog at liberty that lets him go everywhere visible except up to this dog. And I can draw a line in the sand and see this is where Fido ends. And then I have the dog on place who can do whatever he wants on place, but if he gets off the place board, and there's got to be a good couple feet between those lines, they can't be the same line. There's got to be a little buffer space in between in case everything in the world jumps off and you just go, failed rep, and you have to walk up and pick one dog up, take and put in his crate, go pick the other dog up. They can't make contact, right? So if you have to be creative with your use of back ties, do that. But don't allow the possibility of a screw up, right? So make sure you don't let them hit the crack pipe. But one dog is on place and the other dog is at liberty. Now, I'm going to control that dog at liberty because it's crazy when people see dogs working, they think a dog at liberty will be easier to tolerate than a dog in obedience, even drive, but it's not. A dog at liberty is scarier to a dog on place than a dog being done through obedience. Because once they believe that when the dog is being told, sit down, stand, come, heel, whatever, the dog's going to be locked in behavior, they trust you locking them into behavior to make them safe.
Right.
But once they see the dog just doing whatever the hell it wants, then they're like, if it can do whatever it wants, then it can come over here. Now I'm like, all right, here we go, the moment of truth. And that's where you have to prove to the dog you can intervene in liberty and affect the dog. When the dog starts looking, you got to be able to say, look, and have the dog look at you instead. That's not for the dog doing the look command. That's for the dog on the place to see you did it. Mm-hmm. Right? When the dog starts jumping around and spinning and doing zoomies, and the zoomies make the dog on place nervous, you have to be able to look at the dog doing zoomies and go, Fido, easy, and have Fido stop doing zoomies. Again, that's not for the dog doing the zoomies. That's for the dog on the place going, oh, you can stop him from doing zoomies with a word. Right? And that's extremely important for the dog to believe in your ability to control the other dog. Right? Yep. So if the dog starts to walk up to the thing, you can recall them. You can say, leave it. You can say enough. And you show the dog on the place board that you can control that yard. And again, you do that both. Both dogs can be at liberty. Both dogs can be on place. Already, that is the level of management that most people go, whoo, and stop. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Most people stop at under orders on place because once they can put a dog on place, they could put both dogs on place and have dinner. They're all set. Or even one dog on place, one dog loose, and we're watching a movie, and I just enforce place command and enforce the other dog not messing with the place board. You know what I mean? They're just like, we're done. But you can go further, right? It's just the next jump is the one that's not scary for people, but like it takes work, right? So we're already at a point of management where most people would consider that situation fixed, but I don't feel like we're done. You got to teach them how to be at liberty around one another. And that gets into a trick. And there's some things that you need in place before you ever try to do that. To me, there's some things that you need to have in place. I need non-adrenaline zones set up throughout the house, right? So I need the couch to be a no-play zone. And people go, how do you teach that? I teach that to the dog on the tether back in phase 1. I teach that to the dog on the tether who is rolling around and playing and it's all cool, jumps up on the couch and tries to do it, and I go, easy. And if they don't know what that means, you got to teach them. But once they know what it means, you either enforce easy on the couch or you go, and push them off the couch. And they'll like jump back on the couch and you go, You go easy. They don't, you go, push them off the couch. And if they want to do zoomies, they'll do zoomies down there. But if they get on the couch, they must be easy. And this is really important because dog fights happen in bad communication. One dog's over aroused and wants to play and wants to do stuff, and the other dog wants to say no. And the only way they have to say no is by going, Arr. And then the other dog goes, what the hell did you just say to me? And then the fight jumps off. If the dog can jump on the couch and knows that on the couch there will be no play, you've provided them a way to ask for a deceleration that doesn't involve threats of violence. And if they can ask for a deceleration, then we're set. That's all we need. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So anyway, teach the dog that there's deceleration zones. So out in my yard, I'll put up like one of those spools so the dog can jump up on a spool, or I'll build a box so the dog can jump up on the box, and that's a deceleration zone. For me in my own yard, my porch is a deceleration zone. So other people, I've had them put spools out on the yard so the dog can jump up on the thing and ask for help. I teach dogs that middle is a safe place. When a dog gets in between my legs, I will repel all other beings while the dog is between my legs to show them that they can come get in there and ask for assistance. So if I'm out on the yard and one of my dogs goes in the middle, I know they want space and I repel the other dogs. And then that dog has found a way to, without threat of violence, get some space for itself. So they can go get on the porch or they can get between my legs, whichever is closer, right? But I taught safe deceleration places to the dog before I introduced the other dog, right? You need some basic commands. You need easy, enough, leave it, come, down, right? If I don't have those things, I can't orchestrate the song to my liking. If the dogs are over aroused and I think it's about to make one of them want to ask for a deceleration, again, the only way they have to ask for that's with their teeth, then I can go easy and cue easy and everybody on the yard chills. Now we don't have a fight. But it's only because everybody on the yard, one, got easy when I said it and also trusted that everyone else would also. It's like if you're boxing and we're both sparring and then somebody rings the bell, if I know 100%, I've watched you immediately stop boxing at the end of every bell. When the bell rings, we'll both just stop immediately, right? But if I've watched you throw punches after the bell rings, I look like I'm a jerk because I don't stop fighting after the bell either, because I know you're not going to listen to the stupid bell. Like, how can I stop if you don't stop? Right? Mm-hmm. So on the yard, if I go easy or enough and I've rung the bell to make the round stop, the only way it works is if every other dog believes every other dog is going to stop too. If there's any doubt that anybody's going to keep going after the bell, it'll make everybody keep going after the bell. And then there's no bell. Your bell is meaningless. You know what I mean? So yeah, I got to have easy, enough, leave it. So like if a dog is laying down, and my dog walks up and is going to pester them while they're laying down, if I can't go, Fido, leave it, and make him come away from the dog that's laying down, the dog that's laying down is going to have to do something to make him go away. And the problem is, with murder dogs, if you start to negotiate, they just go downhill and kill one another. So if my dog is laying down, and every time dog one walks up to dog two that's laying down, I say, leave it, and I do this repeatedly and consistently, eventually that dog is going to stop pestering dogs that are laying down. And I have now given the dog that's laying down a signal that they can do. They know that if they lay down, they're going to get left alone. And now they have a calming signal, like we talked in the beginning about a Polaroid of a guy's face that says uncomfortable. Now the kid knows, oh crap, I'm making you uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So like I can teach communication and body language to these dogs that don't have a natural aptitude for it, but I've got to do it through repetition and cue building, you know? I would say get a muzzle during these situations. You can do it without, of course, but a muzzle is easier because it makes it where if there's a jump off, you are safe and can calmly take your time and resolve it. You don't have to go like, oh my God, emergency mode and freak out because dogs are bleeding. To the point of a muzzle, make sure, I'm sure I'm jumping all over the place. You're going to ask me questions in a sec, but I was going to get rid of this. In a muzzle, don't just muzzle condition the beginning of the muzzle. People do the, snout in the muzzle, click feed, snout in the muzzle, click feed, and they stop at conditioning the act of putting it on, but they don't condition the act of wearing it long term. Mm-hmm. And dogs paw at muzzles incessantly, and they don't paw at collars. They don't paw at jewelry. The idea of wearing something, they don't freak out about that. They freak out about being blocked. So the reason they don't mess with the collar after a couple minutes is they're like, well, whatever, it's stupid, but it doesn't get in my way, and they leave it alone. Muzzles block them from things, and they eventually start to get pissed at being blocked, and they try to get the muzzle off. So I like to train with a false muzzle, take a muzzle and cut like a Baskerville muzzle and cut the front bars off so they can access things, or take a basket muzzle and cut it like Pac-Man so when they open their mouth, the muzzle opens. And you have a false muzzle. Now that won't work for safety, but again, in the first phase where we're teaching the dog tether for the dog inside the crate, it's also a beautiful time to teach muzzle acclimation. Teach them how to put the muzzle on like everybody else does, but then it goes fake muzzle on, fake muzzle off, fake muzzle on, fake muzzle off. Then you leave the fake muzzle on and play tug. Or do your obedience routine where you're feeding them while they're wearing the fake muzzle. And the dog stops believing that this thing is this immediate source of just pissed off frustration all the time. And worse, you can counter condition a dog to know to put up with a muzzle. Because if you condition the dog to a muzzle and then you go muzzle, mailman, muzzle, mailman, muzzle, mailman. Eventually you put the muzzle on and the dog's like, where's he at? And they get all they get all pumped. Almost did it. They get all pumped, right? So it's like you can actually condition the muzzle to be the get ready to go signal. Right. You know what I mean? So if they have a muzzle on in the yard for 2 hours at a time, they can play fetch with it. They can lick their butt with it. They can eat food with it. They don't care. It becomes just another piece of jewelry like a collar. And then in the 10 minutes that you're going to practice liberty with the two dogs because they've been trained up to that point, they're ready to give it a shot, I can go false muzzle on, play, 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 false muzzle off, real muzzle on, let them go be at liberty. And they're not going to have that like, this thing blocks me, this thing upsets me, because they can sit around for hours on end with the fake muzzle on and have no sense of blockage whatsoever. And then, of course, once they get done, don't just take the muzzle off because you don't want to condition muzzle means bad dog comes out. Take the fake muzzle, take the real muzzle off, fake muzzle on, fake muzzle off, fake muzzle on. Now they get to hang out with the fake muzzle on. They don't acknowledge a difference between the real muzzle and the fake muzzle, and they won't know there's a blockage until they make a jump. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's the long and short of it. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's questions to ask and things that we can pick apart, but that's the basic idea is understand the importance of that social responsibility, and you're proving it to the dog. You're proving social responsibility through obedience, through dog one's obedience. You're proving social responsibility to dog two. That concept is a keystone of this. Then the idea that you've got to teach them how to have ways to decelerate that they believe in, because both of those things are going to combine. When you try to let the dogs become liberated together, they're going to have to know that they can ask for a break on their own without you, and they're going to have to know that you can control a situation. If you start to interject, they believe that when you ring the bell, everybody's going to stop, because if they don't believe that, no one will stop, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
No, I think that's a great analogy too, and the bell analogy is great for people who are involved in any kind of combat sports. It's an interesting point too, and we can tie that back into what we're talking about here with the dogs, right? This goes into part of what you're doing is it's not just getting them to tolerate the other dog, but to be comfortable with the other dog and feel safe around the other dog.
Yes.
Right. And so one question I wanted to have, I wanted to ask early on, when you're talking about your just the first phase where you're training them in front of each other and having them crated next to each other, and of course, you're moving the crates closer and closer as they can handle it. Now. One thing that you didn't say, but I'm sure is part of it, I certainly is part of it when I do it, is if you move those crates closer and closer and they're getting long for a week or so and then one day they're fence fighting again, you're going to move those crates again. You're not going to let them practice that behavior, right? You're going to...
I'm going to stop it. Okay. No. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that obviously if something has happened and we've got a setback, we need to change the criteria.
Right.
But I cannot let the dog know that them blowing up pushed that crate away.
Sure.
Because then we're going to have a real problem. Then they're going to go, hey, how about even further? Bah. How about even further? Bah.
Right.
How about I do this more and maybe you get rid of the dog? Bah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they can't think. They cannot believe that their aggression solves that problem.
Agreed 100%.
So they're going to blow up, and if they blow up, I'm going to go in and I'm going to stop it. And whatever my method of doing that is, like, I don't beat the shit out of dogs. I'm not going to freak out. Even if it is take them because it's now an emergency, separate them, I'm going to very quickly bring them back and down them in at least that same proximity, and then put them back in their crates in that same proximity and show them, like, that did not work. Your violence did not cause the result you wanted it to cause. It did not. Then I'm going to take, later that day, I'm going to take one out. You're going to take one out. We're going to move their crates a little bit further.
Right. Yeah.
It just happened to happen. Hey, look at that.
Right.
Things move around sometimes.
That's a real good distinction. So I appreciate you clearing that up.
Let them see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the real problem is people don't understand, like, violence is, most dogs are not sociopaths. Violence is a tool. And then it's like, if the tool works, it's very hard. Like, the response to failure in something that has been heavily reinforced is persistence.
Right.
So every time it works, you're making them more and more persistent.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I got to break that. I got to make the failure rate go up. Like, they can't get what they want from violence. It can't happen. But that said, before I move the crate away, I would try to, because if they have been fine for a week, it's like the layered stress model. If they've been fine for a week and then they popped off today, it's not the proximity that changed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if they're 10 feet apart and then today 9 feet and then tomorrow 8 feet, and then the next day we go 7 feet and they trip and we go back to 7.5 feet and they're okay, it was the proximity. But if they're at 5 feet for 4 days and then there's a jump off, it's not the 5 feet that's a problem.
Right.
Something happened. Like, was it the unexpected noise that happened behind me? Because if that's the case, then I got to try to manage my sound management better, because when you're defusing a bomb, you don't want somebody to pop a balloon. Like, I got to deal with that. Not forever. Eventually they should be responsible enough to tolerate those sorts of things.
Sure.
But right now, when you're defusing the bomb, don't, like, cough real loud,
Right.
Was one dog, did they just randomly catch eyes and get stuck on the eye magnet? Because if that's the case, I just got to, one, put up a visual barrier so they can't lock eyes, or like a screen, like a partial visual barrier. Two, manage it better. If I see it, go, hey, look, and then they both look at me, I broke it off. You know what I mean? Like, I have a long line attached to the crate. That's a correction I use on dogs in crates.
Cool. Yeah, that's
Have I told you about it?
No, I haven't, but I'm visualizing it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, like, people are like, yeah, I put a long prong collar on a long line. I'm like, no, just put the long line on the crate.
Yeah.
I'll shake the baby in a heartbeat. The dog starts eyeballing. No. Boom. And I'll pop the crate. Not the dog. And the dog thinks, holy crap, what the hell? And you're like, hey, don't do that.
Yeah, no, I like it.
You know what I mean?
I like it.
It is. What's funny is it's still a correction.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a punishment,
Sure.
but it doesn't feel the same as cracking the dog. And I don't know why it feels inherently more fair and less abusive, but it does.
Well, I think from the dog's point of view, it's an environmental change, not an attack on them. So you have a dog who's in the crate who's getting all, squirrely and think about going violent. You apply violence to their neck, and their reaction is likely to be, "Hey, let's go." But when the earthquake starts, people don't generally in an earthquake don't go, "Hey, you attacking me, bro?" Like they.
There was this big old fight one time. I was like, it had to be 20 of us, and it was in a parking lot, and it looked like a bad concert. I mean, it was a big old fight. And a transformer blew on a telephone pole.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like, I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but it looked like lava. Like fire was all, like, nobody kept fighting. I'm pretty committed, and I was like, it was like the weirdest photograph. It's like at that moment there were pictures of dudes still holding one another with their fist cocked back, both looking at the same thing. like, whoa, look at that! That's fire,
Yeah.
So, it's not an attack on their person, but it's a distraction.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a huge difference. And that's something that people don't talk about enough when it comes to, especially the more game dogs, is that that when that dog is on a hair trigger, it's very easy to pull that hair trigger. And and I think that was a mistake I made very early on in my socialization career, was trying to be too physical when dogs were eyeballing each other and in that frozen state that that first level of conflict resolution. How's this going to go? They're in orientation, they're frozen, and I would go, "Hey, knock it off," and they would,
boom.
Yeah, they go, "Oh yes, we're going to do that." And so learning how to gently go, "Come on, let's go," and not shake that little nitroglycerin capsule inside that dog.
So there's a couple little corrections on crate dogs like that. The long line on a crate is good, and so it's stupid, but get an e-collar with a vibrate button and put it in a dish with change on the top of the crate.
Yeah.
Dog's like, what?
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yes. So
stupid little tricks. But it's like, anyway.
Anything to break the orientation.
Yeah, but I can't just go, hey, if you're looking at him, I'll make him go away. Or, hey, if you're violent, I'll make him go away.
Sure.
I can't do that. I've got to teach them that violence does not solve the problem.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. The other thing I really like is your muzzle protocol. Talking about that, I think that was something that I think a lot of people. I know that I have personally struggled a bit with that transition from, just wearing it for a short period of time to wearing it for long periods of time, and I've just made the dog gut it out. It's like, okay, now you're going to put it on, and we're going to wear it for 10 seconds now instead of 2 seconds, and then we're going to do for 15, and it never goes really smoothly. And when you first talked about this, because I saw the same video you saw about the guy doing that, and someone showed it.
Well, I got that video from Pat. Like, I'd never heard about it until Ivan told me about it, and Ivan told me about it from the sense it was reverse, because what I do is I find fighting things and reverse them.
Right.
I reverse engineer stuff. So like in a personal protection dog, if you have a personal protection dog and you have them in a muzzle, you don't want them to feel like they are defenseless when they're in their muzzle.
Right.
Because then you don't want a dog going like, oh no, I don't have my weaponry. Oh no. You know what I mean? So like he puts dogs in the false muzzle and does bite work so they don't feel like they're blocked. Like they still feel powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so the muzzle is not a like, oh man, I can't. I'm weak now, And I was like, I'm going to use that in reverse. That's awesome. That is wonderful, dude. That's great,
Well, when I first heard about it, like I said, someone had shown me that video before. And my mind immediately goes to, I'm a bit of a pessimist this way, but when somebody shows me a new training technique, my mind immediately goes to, what are the potential problems with this?
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And so my first thought was, I don't think that's going to work. And the reason why is the part of the muzzle that frustrates the dog is, as you pointed out, it changes their physical capabilities. Yeah. And letting them wear a muzzle that doesn't change their physical capabilities, to me, left the concern that we still have to have that moment when we change the physical characteristics, and is that going to affect them? It's the same reason why I've never been a big fan of training aggressive dogs with muzzles anyway, because every time I've done that, the moment I take the muzzle off, I've still got that gut check. Like, has he been not trying to bite me because he knows he can't, or has he not been trying to bite me because he's accepted the fact that I'm not someone he needs to bite? But you've been practicing with it for a while now, and it's worked, so I can remove that doubt from my.
It's also just like the conditioned emotional response, like a person who you get along with really well 95% of the time, but then there's that 5% of the time they go into that annoying ass conversation about that stupid show that they like or their dumbass political view, and you're like, ugh, when we go here, I just can't stand you. That person is a different conditioned emotional response than the person that every time they open their face, it's just infuriating. You know what I mean? Like, those are two different dudes.
Yes.
And yes, when the dog is wearing the real muzzle and tries to do something and goes, wait a minute, I can't use my mouth, we're going to have to deal with it. But that's like the time when they start talking about politics, and they don't always talk about politics. Mm-hmm. It's super annoying, but it's tolerable because it's infrequent.
Right.
As opposed to as soon as the muzzle goes on, they're just at their limit of, I hate this stupid thing. And also, who are you bringing out? Because you only put this on me when you bring out the evil thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think the conditioned emotional response that you get is much, much better, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So that's, I mean, I think you hit all the major points. I don't know. I can't think of any questions that I want to add to it. I'm sure some of our listeners may put some questions up on the discussion group. You're a part of that group, so
I mean, I'll respond if you guys put stuff up. I'll respond. I mean, I didn't write it down. I didn't have my prints out in front of me, but yeah, I mean, it bullet point thing is just separate them mechanically, but not socially. First, teach them that the existence of the other dog is not a trigger. Tether and crate. Crate and rotate, but tether the dog until you can prove to the dog in the crate that they're as responsible with a tether off as they are on. And then train in front of the crate until they're bored, and then train in front of place until they're bored, and then train and drive until they're bored. During that process, you working on all your commands, leave it, enough, come, down, stay, place, whatever, look, all those words that you're going to use to orchestrate the yard later on, training them in the muzzle. You train those words and skills and tolerances, training the safe places in the house, training the safe place between your legs. You train all of those things during those early phases. So then when it's time, you have dog on place, dog on liberty. And then you have to practice your management. One dog is secure, one dog is at liberty. And rotate until they're bored. Then once both of them are bored with both dogs are bored with I'm on place, that dog's free, and they trust you, and they trust the gear, and they trust all the things, then we're going to do moments of liberty while they're both together, but you manage, and they're wearing muzzles, and you're managing, and you're doing your thing, and then you do that for just a minute. Like, they might be on the place and liberty phase, and then I'll do I remember we were for about 4 months. We pretty quickly got to one dog on place, one dog at liberty, pretty quickly. But we were there for about 4 or 5 months. And it's like one dog would be on the couch next to me in a place command, like on a positional hold on the couch, and the other dog is walking around the house. No issues. But when we get to the point where both dogs are walking around the house, I would do it at very specific times. I do it in the morning when nobody else was awake. The mailman's not going to come. There's no alarm clock about to go off. And I know I've got a 30-minute stretch of just dead. And that's when we would do it for about 5 minutes. And then I would, good work, guys. And one of them would go back to place. And we'd go back to the safe spot. And then we would do that. And then it went from 5 minutes to 30 minutes. And then eventually it was they're both at liberty until we're about to do dinner. And then one's got to be on, or they both have to be on place, or we got to go back to the management during this. Or I know that the school bus and the mailman come between 2 and 4. So between 2 and 4, we're managing. You know what I mean? Like after 11 p.m., we're Liberty, but before 11 p.m., no. And then you just eventually reduce those times as they learn how to tolerate the spikes. You reduce those times until now they're never in their crates. You know?
It's awesome. It's awesome. All right.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Sweet. Thanks for coming on. What you got coming up? What you got? Workshops coming up? You got?
No.
You're not prepared.
Tons of stuff, man. I mean, I'm going to be in May. I'm going to be like, I guess that's coming right up, huh? March, April, May. Holy crap. Yeah. Coming right up. In May, I'm going to be in Utah. I'm doing a week of seminars out at Heather Beck's place. We're going to do some events out there. There's a ton of GRC stuff. The events calendar's getting packed. It's pretty cool. In September, I'm going to be at ICP doing a presentation on flexi leads. Yeah, retractable leashes. I'm going to make people pull their eyeballs out.
No, it's awesome. I love the fact that you're challenging people on that assumption right there. It's
Can
so
you
much
imagine
fun.
the conversations that are going to happen afterwards? People are just going to be, ugh. I broke out today. This girl's been staying here training. She's been here for about a week now, and so she's got 2 dogs, and she runs them at the same time. We've been doing a bunch of training, and today I broke out the retractable. That is the double.
This little
It's
swivel.
Two retractables, and it spins. I walked out with that, and she just shook her head. And I was like, what? It was like your thing. She was like, honestly, I knew that I was going to be challenged in the stuff you're asking me to do. She was like, but I honestly didn't even picture you bringing one of those out. She was like, I didn't even know that existed. Yeah. Get out of your comfort zone. Double retractable. That's cool. But it's rad, dude. Her dogs are cool. It's easy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm doing an ICP at September on retractable, and then big inaugural championship, national championship here for JRC in November.
Sweet.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff, man. All kinds of cool stuff. You can look JRC Dog Sports on Facebook or jrcdogsports.com. Whatever. It's around. You can find me. I have stuff happening. Google me, bro.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming in and sitting down with us. I think this is going to be one of the more valuable episodes that I've put together so far. And I'm glad you came in. All right. Well, I guess that's it, everybody. We'll see you all later.
Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Jay.
All right, dude. I will talk to you like in 20 minutes. I'll see you.
All right.